Hello, New Paltz. Welcome to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'm here every Friday at 2 p.m. talking movies, new reviews, recommendations, lists. I just love movies, and that's what I do here. On today's show, I'm going to review Black Phone 2, give a little recap and review of some of the films I saw this week at the Woodstock Film Festival, and close out the show with my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. I'll be right back with my review for Black Phone 2, but first here's some movie music, starting with the Apollo 13 main title theme by James Horner. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Kicking off the show today, let's talk about Black Phone 2. Directed by Scott Derrickson, it's a sequel to 2022's The Black Phone, also directed by Derrickson. The first movie follows a young boy named Finn, played by Mason Thames, who gets kidnapped by a notorious child serial killer named the Grabber, played by Ethan Hawke, and must escape with assistance from a mysterious phone in his captivity room, which allows him to talk to the spirits of the Grabber's past victims. This sequel picks up a few years down the line, with Finn struggling with his life after his captivity, as his sister Gwen begins having dreams of a mysterious winter camp that has ties to the Grabber. For some better and some worse, this movie has many differences from the first film. It has some new elements to offer, some brutal moments, and a bit of emotion, but also becomes too aggressive with adding lore that really hurts the pacing and makes for a less gripping experience than the first movie. So, a big element of this movie is Gwen's dreams. This was a power of this character and the supernatural side of this world that was established in the first movie, and certainly played a big role in that story, but here becomes an even huger aspect in how this story is told and plays out. Gwen as a character really plays a larger role this time around than Finn, but their relationship remains an engaging aspect of these movies, how much they care about each other, how much they look out for each other and will go to great lengths to protect the other, really continues to shine as the heart of these movies. Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw are really good again here. They feel like older versions of their characters after what they went through in the first movie. Finn is much more hardened and aggressive and emotionally closed off, and Gwen is having to look after him and try to help him, keep him out of trouble, while also dealing with her own dreams and what it means for them and their history with the Grabber, and the performances adapt to this time jump and roles really well. And as a plot element, I think having mysterious clues appear to her to become puzzle pieces that need to be solved that leads them to this camp was an interesting setup. The lore of spirits being able to communicate with the living has been established, so setting the story off like that made for an intriguing setup. Going into this movie, I really didn't know much about the plot. The first movie doesn't really set up a sequel, so I was interested to see where this was going. But once things got to the camp, the story really starts to falter with its pacing. The dream sequences where Gwen's dreams show her clues or some lore of the world becomes way too frequent. A bunch of the middle of the movie involves the characters at the camp investigating some history and getting freaked out by dreams and ominous messages. There's very little momentum in the story that presents an imminent threat or goal that needs to be reached. The first movie is this survivalist concept of being trapped in a serial killer's basement and you need to find a way to escape before he kills you. It's so raw, it's so survivalistic. This movie really doesn't have anything like that for much of the movie, and the actual goal doesn't become clear until much later on. And on that same note, it takes a long time for Ethan Hawke to appear as well. The Grabber as a character plays a big role in the story, with Finn still dealing with the trauma of his captivity by him, and how these dreams begin appearing to Gwen. But Ethan Hawke as this character is very infrequently on screen earlier in the movie, and that is something certainly that I missed about this movie that was so strong in the first, how much of a presence he was throughout the whole movie. And Ethan Hawke as this character is just tremendous. He's so sinister, so creepy. The voice and physical presence he brings makes the character such an awful menace. He can't be reasoned with, he needs to carry out his evil and vengeance, and is just a force of pure evil. And when he's in this movie, that all still stands. The performance is still tremendous, and even the ways they have the Grabber be a threat to the characters in a different way now, and how it ties into this haunting presence he has that ties into the supernatural side of this world as well, did work for me, and Ethan Hawke just continues to make him absolutely terrifying. But that pacing of how many dream sequences and learning about this camp without the threat or goal being very clear really hurt the terror that the first movie made you feel so effectively throughout the entire movie. And specifically with these dream sequences, most of them provide deeper lore of the world, the history of the grabber, and how everything ties together, and I think that also really contributes to how much they hurt the pacing. Much of the sequences do provide lore that ties into what is currently happening in the story, but it takes up so much of the movie that feels like it's really building up this mystery that isn't that interesting, and it's taking away time from the survivalist aspect, from the imminent danger. And a lot of the lore is also very exposition heavy, telling a lot of the history that begins to connect a lot of the world in a way that feels very forced and obligatory. Some of the lore is relevant to the current story, some of it just feels forced, and there are some unanswered questions from the first movie that didn't seem very pressing. They aren't really answered, but they didn't seem like they really needed to be. Didn't seem like a sequel was super necessary to close the book on some of them, but nonetheless, this movie does that, and it really connects a lot of dots that didn't seem like they needed to be connected. It presents backstories that don't necessarily make no sense. They don't ruin the first movie, but I also wouldn't say they enhance the story of the first movie or this one very much, and the overconnection becomes too much at times. When you get into the horror elements, though, what the goal of the story ends up being at this camp ends up being a decent idea, and when the grabber becomes more of an imminent threat, things do get exciting. The dream sequences and how they interact with the real world end up getting really disturbing and have some cool visual elements. The film grain look for the dream sequences and the noise distortion was really interesting. It gives the feeling of disorientation and murky feeling of dreams in a really effective way without being too distracting or annoying. The third act also presents some cool visuals of how the spirit world and real world interact, and the rules of all that, and how they can affect each other, that makes the grabber even more of a physical threat and harder to defeat in interesting ways that tie into the lore of the franchise that's been established. The gore and graphicness is really effective at bringing a haunting atmosphere, as does the setting. The snowy camp setting provided a bigger place than the original, taking place in mostly a basement, but it's still effective as a horror setting. Things like the weather come into play to create a suffocating atmosphere where things seem pretty quiet and ordinary, but the signs point to a dark and really gruesome history. There's some really creative camera work as well. One shot in particular comes with this circling sort of motion that sucks you in and makes the dialogue of the scene and what's taking place feel even more haunting. The grabber's look is also a great design for a horror villain. The mask is so creepy, and this kind of rocky texture to it makes it so unsettling, like it's a ritualistic artifact or something that gives him such a demonic look to him, and of course the smile and horns just get under your skin. It's uncomfortable to even look at a lot of the times, and it's particularly effective in these scenes where he's doing just messed up, awful stuff. There's a visual of the grabber later in the movie I didn't care for that I thought made him look way too silly, but other than that, I think the look and presence of this character is still great when he's in this movie. He's a horrifying villain. Hawk's performance and the visual elements both support that. There is also some pretty powerful emotional moments later in the movie that added some human depth to this story as well. It's some pretty heavy stuff that shows care taken with the characters and to try to build a connection with them that was very appreciated. The horror elements are certainly still the main draw here, but having these moments with the characters that ties into what they've been through was great to see, and there's some scenes that hit really hard. The character work in this movie is overall pretty strong, and it's nice to see some effort taken with the characters that makes this movie feel a little more meaningful. And overall, Black Phone 2 is a sequel that I don't think was really necessary. It changed the story up with the setting and deeper dive into the supernatural side of this world. It adds some lore that builds the world out a bit. Some of it is interesting, some of it forces connections that weren't really necessary, but the dream sequences and how much time it takes the movie to get to the grabber showing up really hurts the pacing and made it hard to get engaged. The horror elements and Return of the Grabber work well when things really get going. Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw progress these characters well, but this is overall a less impactful movie than the first. While I don't think the sequel was fully necessary and it's much messier, there's still things to enjoy for fans of the original. I give it a 70 out of 100. If you like the first movie, you should see it. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with The Battle by Hans Zimmer, Gavin Greenaway, the Lyndhurst Orchestra, and Lisa Gerrard from the Gladiator score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, the Woodstock Film Festival was this past week, and I was able to see 6 movies total at the festival that I'm going to talk about a little bit here. give you some movies that are going to be released soon that you might want to look out for. The festival was a lot of fun. I volunteered a little, watched some movies, met some awesome people. It's such a great event to have so many talented filmmakers showing their work here each year. I definitely recommend going to some movies when it comes around every October, and even volunteering if you can. It's just fantastic. And the first movies I want to talk about are two documentaries I saw. These are two movies I didn't know much about the subject matter, and they were so different from movies I usually watch. I didn't really know about what the movies were going into them, but I think that's so valuable at a film festival, seeing movies outside your normal zone that have so much to offer as well. The first documentary was River of Grass, directed by Sasha Wurtzel. It's an ode to the Florida Everglades, past and present, told through the prescient writings of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and those who today call the region home. This was a really interesting documentary on a national park I didn't know too much about. It shows many different angles of the park and what it means to different people. One is of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who was a conservationist and writer who wrote a book on the Everglades called River of Grass, and much of it is about her dedication to conserving the beauty of the park. There's lots of footage of her showing how interesting of a person she was, how driven she was, and very passionate about the Everglades and their conservation. There's also perspectives from locals and the cultural significance to them, many of the environmental issues facing the Everglades today, and how its ecosystems are being disrupted. It takes this very beautiful place, shows how much it means to so many people, and really makes you care about what's going on with it and the importance of its conservation. There's some beautiful water shots of sea creatures and flowing water that create a very immersive experience as well. Sasha Wurtzel was at the screening of the film. She did a Q&A afterwards and talked about her as a Florida local, what it means to her, and seeing the problems the park has been facing. She also did some voiceover for the film that shows a lot of passion for the park and this film. This is a really interesting documentary, taught me a lot about the park I didn't know much about, and the filmmaker's personal experience and passion, as well as all involved with the film, is really powerful and really shines through. The second documentary I saw was called Arrest the Midwife. Directed by Elaine Epstein, it chronicles the arrest of 3 midwives serving Amish and Mennonite communities. This was a subject matter I didn't know much about as well, and this is a really gripping and also infuriating story. The situation of these midwives being arrested comes from basically New York State not recognizing a certain midwife certification that these midwives have, making them technically practicing midwifery without proper certification in the state, even though they are very qualified, have a great reputation, and most other states do recognize the certification they have. The story is framed around the arrests of these 3 women, and really gets involved in the communities they serve and what they mean to people. Being midwives is something they love and is part of their identity, that being told they can't do it really hits home to them, and seeing all the community effort to help them in their legal case and how much support is in this community is really inspiring. It also dives into some legislative efforts being taken in the state to change the midwife certification laws, and the film really drew me in as this story of a community coming to support someone in need and fighting for what they believe in to change things for the better. Elaine Epstein and a few other people who worked on the film as well did a Q&A, and they talked about filming in the community and how members of the community grew more trusting of the crew over time, and how once the arrests started, Epstein had to make this movie and really chronicle what is going on. And it's a very effective film that I had very little knowledge about, and it really gets you invested in the story, makes you angry as well, and it's really sad but also really inspiring. The third movie I saw is in the category of a big release for sure, that is Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. The third film in the Knives Out franchise, directed and written by Rian Johnson, depicting the murder mystery cases of Detective Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig. The ensemble cast this time features Josh O'Connor, Glenn Close, Josh Brolin, Mila Kunis, Jeremy Renner, Kerry Washington, Andrew Scott, Kaylee Spaney, Daryl McCormick, and Thomas Hayden Church. This case takes Blanc to a murder of a prominent church leader in a small town. This is another great Knives Out mystery. Its setting and characters are pretty different from the past films. This series is staying fresh while giving you what you want from these movies each time. It's consistent, but it's not getting stale. When it comes to the story, the way Johnson ties all these events and characters together, showing you events, then going back to them and showing what really happened with more added context, the stories are complex and keep you on your toes, but they're still coherent to follow, and the pieces of the mystery fit together so well and are really clever. The ensemble here is stacked full of great actors. I will say, as for the characters though in this ensemble, it's definitely the least effectively integrated ensemble into the story of the film so far. The first two films have more of a web of relationships and dynamics between the characters. Almost every character has some conflict or connection to another. Here, there's some much less developed characters that don't get a ton to do, and the relationships between all of them feel less defined, less developed, and some start to blend into the background in a way that the first two films' characters never did. Still, the performances are great. Kerry Washington, in particular here, gets some really gripping scenes, but again, I wanted a little more from her character as well. And Josh O'Connor is awesome here. He's so energetic and commands the screen. He has this perfect balance of manic energy and charm that makes him funny and really engaging. Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc refuses to miss. He's such a fun character. His personality, his smarts, his confidence, I can't get enough of him. Josh Brolin is hilarious here as well. This is, I think, easily the funniest Knives Out movie so far, and he contributes a lot to that. And overall, the ensemble could have been integrated better and developed the characters a little deeper, but this is another captivating and fun Benoit Blanc mystery that keeps this series hot. The next movie I watched was Nuremberg. Directed by James Vanderbilt, it follows a World War II psychiatrist, played by Rami Malek, who evaluates Nazi leaders before the Nuremberg trials, growing increasingly obsessed with understanding evil as he forms a disturbing bond with Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command, played by Russell Crowe. I really like historical movies, and especially ones that show specific important events in major points in history. This is a World War II movie, of course, but the Nuremberg trials are such an interesting event to focus on as an important part of the end of the war. The movie shows the importance of trying the Nazis instead of just executing them, putting them on the world stage to expose their crimes, and showing the world all the evil they did in the hopes that something like it won't happen again. Rami Malek's character comes in as this psychiatrist that seeks to understand what made the Nazis do what they did, what about their personalities and character enabled them to take over a whole nation and commit all these atrocities while they were in power, and it leads him to all these sessions with Russell Crowe as Göring, who is just great here. He's so confident, so arrogant, so narcissistic. Knowing all the evil he was part of course makes you hate him right away, but the way Crowe brings the smugness and his belief in the Nazi regime to life really brings that awfulness to him. Their scenes together are so captivating, with Malek's character becoming fascinated with him, and the movie has a lot to say about what leads to authoritarian regimes and atrocities like the Holocaust that is so scary and sad, but keeps you so invested in how this all plays out. The trial scenes are really gripping as well. The dialogue and battles that take place in the court is great courtroom drama stuff, and the psychological aspect of it too makes it interesting as well, as the prosecution and witnesses on the stand kind of have mind battles with each other. And Michael Shannon is also great here and really shines in the legal side of the story, him playing kind of the lead prosecutor trying the Nazis in the Nuremberg trials. And I also love the production design and recreation of the 1940s World War II era with the wardrobe, the vehicles, technology. There's a few characters that feel a little underdeveloped, but overall Nuremberg is a captivating World War II drama, blending a fascinating true story, psychology, and a courtroom drama that has so much to say about authoritarianism and hate that keeps you engaged in so many ways. The next movie I watched was Rental Family. Directed by Hikari, it follows an American actor in Tokyo struggling to find purpose, played by Brendan Fraser, who lands an unusual gig, working for a Japanese rental family agency, playing stand-in roles for strangers. He rediscovers purpose, belonging, and the beauty of human connection. This is a really sweet movie. Brendan Fraser is so wonderful here. He plays such a lovable guy that draws you into his struggle with his loneliness and trying to become an actor and wondering how he can do that. And this whole concept of the rental family agency is very unusual and unique and brings some really funny moments and is just a really interesting concept that sucks you into this story and how it ties into themes of human connection, the value of relationships, and as well as the harm in lying and running from your problems. It's a really funny movie that balances its tone so perfectly, but it's also serious. It has some very hard-hitting emotional moments, but the humor and sweetness make it so enjoyable. The setting of Japan is really nice as well. The score is really effective. It can be so cheerful and gets really powerful in these emotional moments. This is just a wonderful dramedy with a wonderful Brendan Fraser performance and a beautiful story about human connection and facing your problems in life and finding your purpose. The last movie I watched at the festival was Dust Bunny. Directed by Brian Fuller, it stars Sophie Sloane, Mads Mikkelsen, and Sigourney Weaver. An 8-year-old girl asks her scheming neighbor for help in killing the monster under her bed that she thinks ate her family. This is a very strange genre blender that unfortunately didn't work for me. It sort of blends a hitman, organized crime story with this kind of fairy tale story of a monster under your bed, and the story, characters, and world never drew me in. The movie has a strange, dreamlike quality at many points that was weird in a way I didn't enjoy. It's kind of jumbled and confusing, the characters and relationships feel very rushed, and how this whole world works and ties together, and how the mysteries unfold just didn't interest me. The humor felt very forced and awkward. Sigourney Weaver has some very uncomfortable moments that really failed with the humor in my opinion. The cast is solid, Mads Mikkelsen is always great, and the sets are really interesting at times too with his very otherworldly and colorful look. But the world building and story never got my attention enough. The humor was annoying, and how this organized crime tied into the sillier sides of the story was not a blend that worked for me, and the whole tone felt off. I hate to end it on a negative note like that, but I'm so glad I saw all these movies, even Dust Bunny. Going to a film festival lets you get exposed to new kinds of movies you might not have otherwise watched. I highly encourage going to the Woodstock Film Festival or any other festivals you can make it to. Volunteer if you can as well. They do so much for the filmmaking community and sharing so many talented filmmakers and their work. Be looking out for all these movies. Even though I didn't care for Dust Bunny, it might be for you. Check these out. And overall, I just loved my experience with the Woodstock Film Festival this year. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Knives Out by Nathan Johnson from the movie Knives Out. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Closing out the show today, I'm going to give you my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. Every week, I like to take 3 movies from years past and give a little review/recommendation on them. This week, my first throwback recommendation is 2015's The Martian. Directed by Ridley Scott, it stars Matt Damon as an astronaut named Mark Watney, who becomes stranded on Mars after his team assumes him dead and must rely on his ingenuity to find a way to signal to Earth that he is alive and can survive until a potential rescue. This is a movie I actually remember seeing in theaters when it came out when I was about 10, and I remember I was always fascinated and terrified with the idea of being stranded on a deserted island. I thought it was kind of a common thing to some way or another find yourself isolated somewhere and needing to find ways to survive and hoping that someone comes around to rescue you or you can find your way off somehow. And I remember at around the same time as this, I watched Robert Zemeckis' Castaway as well with Tom Hanks, and seeing all he goes through to survive and how resourceful and resilient he needed to be and how long he was there for, and it looked terrifying. And the thought of being stuck alone like that kind of freaked me out. And The Martian takes that idea and brings it to space, brings it to Mars, and this is a very tense but also very funny and entertaining movie. Damon's performance and character here is a perfect lead to a story like this. Damon is so good at playing really funny and likable guys, and you get so invested in his rescue and caring about him. He jokes around and finds ways to find humor in his very existential and dangerous situation that just makes him so magnetic and likable. He's really smart, and his determination in this mission and showing all the progress he makes is so rewarding. You feel like you're watching him take every step closer to home, and that each scene gets him closer and closer to his goal. And the movie has a framing device of cameras all around his base on Mars that he talks to as a video diary that allows Mark to kind of talk to the audience, and it worked really well at making him feel close and connected with him. It's used a little for exposition, of course, but also these scenes feature some of the film's funniest moments, as well as really emotionally impactful moments, given that the diaries are also an outlet for Mark to talk about his experience and work through his emotions, and that is key too. He's very funny, but the seriousness and terror of his situation has its moments to come out, and some low moments for sure, that really make Mark a multi-dimensional character that can be very positive and driven, but also isn't totally unshaken by the situation he's in. And the rest of the supporting cast is great as well. Chiwetel Ejiofor, Jessica Chastain, Benedict Wong, Jeff Daniels, Kristen Wiig, Sean Bean, Sebastian Stan, Michael Pena, and even some more great names. This cast is just actually insane. Another big front of the story is the NASA team on Earth, led by Jeff Daniels and Chiwetel Ejiofor's characters primarily, that is coordinating with Mark and doing what they need to do on Earth to complete the rescue. There's a lot of interesting stuff with the script in terms of the timing of phases of the plan, the science of fuel consumption and propulsion, and what they need Mark to do and when, that is really captivating and shows how difficult and complex this mission is and how brilliant the people involved are. From the administrative side of NASA and making tough decisions, to the scientists who work so hard to develop the technology needed for this rescue and solving problem after problem that comes up. It makes the problem solving so interesting, and the science of everything is so cool. The conflict between the characters is interesting too, with disagreements on the plan as well as things like release of information and weighing the consequences of each decision that really makes this so tense. There's also a good amount of humor too that lightens things up at appropriate times. The jokes never undercut dramatic scenes. It's not too frequent that it becomes annoying, so every humor scene felt very welcome and balanced the tone really well. The visuals of Mars and these space sequences also look incredible. The setting of Mars, the vast orange expanse he's in, really shows the isolation and terror of this place. It looks beautiful with the vibrant colors and the sand, but the idea of being stuck in this place alone for an extended period of time is also nothing short of terrifying, and the visuals of Mars capture this beauty and terror so well. The space sequences bring some action as well, and the sets of these spaceships and how the astronauts move around in these environments look really cool as well. Overall, The Martian is one of my favorite Matt Damon and Ridley Scott movies. It's smart sci-fi, interesting characters, and really engaging and entertaining. My second throwback recommendation for this week is 2003's School of Rock. Directed by Richard Linklater, it stars Jack Black as Dewey Finn, who, after being kicked out of his rock band, becomes a substitute teacher of an uptight elementary private school, only to try and turn his class into a rock band. This is one of those really absurd scenarios for a comedy that fully commits and is so sincere that it's so enjoyable and funny. Jack Black could not be more perfect for this role. I genuinely can't think of anyone that could have done this better. He plays this lazy guy that's at a low point that has so much passion for music that he's never been able to find success with, and Jack Black shows all this so well. You believe him as a guy that would come up and execute this crazy plan to take over an elementary school class, to start a band instead of teaching the class, and that his passion for teaching these talented students the beauty of rock and roll would cloud his judgment to not care how insane this all is. The teaching scenes are so much fun, and how he connects with the class and helps introduce them to rock and roll that this prep school has never allowed them to experience, and how he helps them break out of their shells is so enjoyable. The movie has really positive messages about being true to yourself, not caring what others think about you, and going after what you love, that, as problematic as what he's doing in his plan is, makes the movie really wholesome as well. Joan Cusack is also great here, and her character has a really interesting role in the story that goes beyond what is immediately expected and makes her so well-rounded. The whole movie really treats every character like a real person with struggles and goals and not just stereotypes, and as crazy as it is, it's also very human and relatable of a story. My third throwback recommendation for this week is 1997's Donnie Brasco. Directed by Mike Newell, it follows an FBI undercover agent who infiltrates the mob, played by Johnny Depp, and finds himself identifying more with the mafia life at the expense of his regular one. I love mafia movies, and this one also gives a new angle to the whole thing, dealing with this undercover operation that complicates the characters' lives so much. It shows the work-life balance that becomes almost impossible to handle when this deep undercover, the family struggles that Depp's character faces as he has to lead these dual lives, and the toll it takes on his marriage. There's a lot of classic mafia movie things like building out this organization, some of the history of it, some of the different players and factions involved that builds this conflict out. It creates a tense story that not only has conflict within the crime organization, but also this idea of being an undercover cop and having to navigate this already dangerous world while you're trying to take it down and make sure you're not exposed as a mole. There's danger all over the place for Depp, and it doesn't let up. Al Pacino is also great here as this kind of mentor to Depp's character, a longtime member of this organization that is never taken too seriously, and their bond they form drives a lot of the conflict as well, with Depp's character having to balance these lives, finding where he assigns his loyalty as he becomes closer to Al Pacino's character, and with the crime elements and physical danger, as well as with the elements of conflicts with the characters' relationships and secrets. It's a very complex story on many fronts that has so many layers to it. Depp is just amazing at showing all this, his conflict, his anger, and struggling what to do at every turn. The characters are all complex and you really get invested. This is a super tense and thrilling crime movie that satisfies traditional elements of the genre while having a cat and mouse story that deals with themes of secrets and loyalty. This is just an awesome movie. I'll be right back to close out the show, but first here's some TV music, starting with the Severance main titles by Theodore Shapiro. That's going to be it for me this week on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'll be back next Friday at 2 p.m. with a review for Chris Stuckman's new horror movie Shelby Oaks, as well as some more movie talk, but until then, have a good week.